Okay, well, great to have George Randle with us today on the ET project. Great honor. Thank you, George. I know it's quite early over where you're sitting in the world, and I really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to come and talk with our listeners. So I look forward to our conversation today.
Yeah, thanks, Wayne, for having me on. And I am, as I get older, I'm getting up earlier because I don't want to waste any hour of the day. So I'm up at about 3:45 a.m. U.S. Central every day of the week.
I'm not going to go there, George.
Well, secret is I go to bed early.
Right.
So it's a good way to get the day started. So it's really great that this is the first thing to be with you today.
Excellent, excellent. Well, I appreciate it. I normally kick off with a question about any fun facts that you would like to share about yourself,
Well,
about others.
the fun fact about me is that I lead this incredibly busy life, which I'm very, very grateful for.
Mhm.
It's great to be needed, wanted, and to have work. So like I'm up early, but with all of that comes, a need for a decompression valve. So I am an avid and have been for 45 years, which tells you a little bit about my age, a soccer player. And I had a conversation, excuse me, with my significant other, and she was just like, saw me limping off the field. She says, "Are you ever going to stop playing soccer?" And I said, "I will stop playing when I can't." And so she thinks I'm a little insane to be playing with, guys that are 15, 20 years younger than me. But I'm like, it's the greatest decompression valve in the world. And most people look at me with a little bit of gray in my beard. They're like, oh my God, you're still running around in Texas heat. So it's just a great way to kind of let the week go and to have something to recharge your batteries, especially in today when, I know all the people that you talk to, there's kind of a corporate athlete,
Mm.
and you have to really take good care of yourself and find outlets that are above and beyond work.
Right. So you take it out on the small round ball on the field and de-stressing by laying the boot into it and sprinting up and down. So very, very
And
nice.
wrestling off defenders that want
Uh,
to take me out. So yes, yeah, but it's one of those things where, when you get out on the field that, kind of the world just melts away.
mm.
And I'm grateful that I still have the ability to play a sport that I love.
Yeah, and the listeners can't see us, unfortunately. We're only doing audio, but I made the comment when we first caught up that you still look in very good condition, despite how old you
Uh,
might feel. Yeah.
yeah, it's there's still that in the morning the alarm goes off and it's kind of like you can't. I wish the listeners could see it, but it's kind of one, two, and then you swing your body over out of bed on the count of three. But yeah, it was a nice compliment. I just work hard at it because, well, here's an interesting fun fact really quick.
Yeah.
I do stay fit. I'm in the gym 4 days a week. I'm on my bike. I road cycle and I play soccer.
Mm.
I consider myself, for my age, turning 56 on Monday, by the way, the 8th, and I consider myself fit. My oldest is turning 30 and she has a grandson. My cardio lasts maybe 45 minutes to an hour with that grandson. He is a Texas tornado. And I'm like, no matter I don't even know how I got through parenting, Wayne, to be honest with you. I'm like, this kid wears me out in 45 minutes flat. So it's crazy.
That's probably why you're still fit, why you're still young.
It is just to keep up with him. That kid, all of a sudden, you blink an eye, and that child's gone.
Mm. Well,
So,
I'm 6 years your senior, and I have an 8-year-old daughter, so I kind of
oh,
understand what you're talking about.
I don't know how you do it, my friend. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure I do it so well, but we're still here to talk about it, which is great. Anything around you or in the world today that's exciting you?
Well, I think, I've been really, really fortunate. After I left the military, I was enlisted as an officer, and I got into the talent game.
Hmm.
And I have just been passionate about the human dynamic. I'm an avid people watcher. If I go to a shopping mall or something,
Right.
behavioral analytics, and I love it. So I'm so passionate about talent. But I think what's amazing me in the world is that that we've gone through in the past. I don't even know what the timeline is, maybe 2 years now, but we've gone from working in office and having these, drive-by meetings and this socialization, this collaboration and community to all of a sudden we're working remote. Everybody created a new normal.
Yep.
And there's a shortage of people out there. And so we're dealing with clients with a shortage of people. And then now economically, we see some of the things turning across the world where that's now back contracting again. And people asked me if I was worried. And I said, I'm really not, because in my function, it's always been about people, whether there's too few, too many. At the end of the day, whatever your count is, it's about getting the people factor right.
Yes.
And the leadership right, because whatever your product or your service, one of the things we wrote about in the book, which I know we'll talk about, is the only competitive advantage you can hope to have and achieve or maintain is great talent. And it hasn't changed in the world. It's just the environment around that talent. And so it keeps me going, watching the world and how important people are to all of the things going on, be it politically, economically, or even socially nowadays.
Right, exactly. Well, that's a nice lead into my normal question, which is around your career and anything that you would like to share with the listeners that sort of stands out for you over the journey that you've been on. Anything that they might be interested in learning about.
Okay, things that I can disclose. Well, the short thumbnail is, I grew up relatively poor. And I knew that I wanted to go to college. My parents really, had a strong emphasis on all the boys going to college. So I joined the Army, Army Reserves, to pay for my way through school. And I caught the leadership bug and eventually became an officer and did a lot of great leadership positions, some very tough tours around the world. And then I jumped into the corporate world and I actually fell backwards into HR and talent. And it was because of a geographical move I had to make for my family and some sacrifices. And I'm like, somebody said, can you do recruiting? Can you do talent? I shrugged my shoulders. I said, well, how hard could it be? Famous last words.
Famous last words. I was just thinking, yes.
But I got into it. And I guess it's a funny fact is, you may think I'm fit now, but here's a fun fact. Sorry, we'll jump back, but this is part of the story. I was one of those kids when puberty hit that my height came, no weight came. I had to gain 4 pounds to join the U.S. Army. So I'm poor, I'm skinny, I'm named George. And back in my day, that was not the ideal name, although I'm named after my father, who's my hero. And it kind of came full circle when I fell back into talent. When you're poor, skinny, tall, have acne, you learn to talk, fight, and run. And then you go into the Army and it's always about building teams. And so right after about 90 days into HR, it clicked in my head. I love talking and working with people and building really dynamic teams. And so that spawned a 25-year career in talent acquisition as an executive, leadership positions. And ultimately, my teams have hired like 80,000 across the globe. And can't say I know it all, but I can tell you I have never, ever, ever been bored, ever. And I love being in the talent function. But then from there, I partnered up with a guy named Mike Sorelli to write an Amazon best-selling book, The Talent War, How Special Operations and Great Organizations Win on Talent. And now I'm the primary person I'm a managing partner for an executive search firm. And so it's just different levels of talent. And I'm loving it.
Right. It's quite interesting. We'll segue into the book now anyway, but I mean, just looking at your bio and reading through some of the, I'd call them adventures. You may not call them adventures at the time, but extremely interesting journey throughout the last 25 years, probably even longer than that, I guess. And I'm sure you've gained a wealth of experience through different stages of that career. And, one of the things that I often look back myself is, what are those key milestones as we go through our career that may be pivotal moments for us that our listeners are quite new to or maybe
Mm-hmm.
can relate to as well. And, it's for me, one of the takeaways is the value of reflection as
Mm-hmm.
you progress through your career. Don't just stay always moving forward. You need to learn a little bit from where you've been.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um,
I think there were probably, I mean, if I sat and pondered, I could come up with a lot more, but I think there were really four key ones for me. And the first one was I enlisted in the Army. I didn't know what I was getting into. I mean, the commercials are great. At the time it was Be All You Can Be, and there are all
right,
kinds of
right.
movies, and you have all these delusions of what it's going to be like. But after I got into it, I remember somebody said to me, they said, George, you have a pretty colorful vocabulary. That's the nice way of saying what they told me. They said, so why don't you go be an officer? And I think the first light bulb moment for me was I really do have a passion for leading and the
Mhm.
ability to influence other people. So that was the first light bulb moment where I went from, I'm not just looking for a job, but I want to lead, I want to impact. I want to impact the people around me to do great things because it's about building teams. The second one was the one I just talked about, was getting into HR, was realizing that I always thought HR personnel, payroll, comp, and benefits. And then I realized, hey, this is really something I'm passionate about. And so the
Mm,
light bulb moment that talent for me in some form or fashion was going to spawn a 25-year career. I didn't know it then, but I knew I found a passion.
right.
Probably third light bulb moment really was understanding as part of that journey, somewhere in there it happened that I'm like, I had been at so many different companies, and there was a moment where I realized it isn't your product, it isn't your service, it always is your people.
Mm,
And there's a millions of companies that you and I could probably name if given time where they thought they cornered the market on their product or on their service, and they lost sight of their people.
yes.
And so that drove me further. But then as I moved into the senior ranks of human resources and talent acquisition, I grew up, like I said, I grew up a skinny kid named George, and you have this people pleasing mentality as a recruiter. Like, I want to show the executives, I want to show these leaders how valuable our team is. And that never worked. No matter how hard I tried, no matter how hard my team. So the last light bulb moment was, wait a minute, I'm the tip of the spear here. I'm the gateway for the standards of the talent in this company. I am your partner to bring talent solutions to business problems.
Mm,
And then from that point, it was the book, it was really launching off. So those big four moments about, hey, I like leadership, it's about building great teams, I'm really, really a partner. Those are things I think that along the way, when I realized them, helped me make better career and decisions about my own personal life, but helped me support the people that I was working with all that much better.
mm. Powerful insights. Thank you. Let's dive a little bit into your book, if that's okay.
Okay. Yeah.
You've already mentioned the co-author Mike Sorelli,
Yep.
and the book again, the Talent War: How Special Operations and Great Organizations Win on Talent. It From what I can gather from the book, reading through it, it draws firsthand experience from both of you, but you
Mm-hmm.
also call on a lot of expertise from military colleagues as well as corporate experts, corporate leaders. And for me, there was a huge number of takeaways that I got from it. It and I say this in a very nice way. The military at the moment is almost in vogue. You've got
Yeah.
Jocko, you've got Leif Babin, you've got David Goggin, and now
And
both of,
Jocko wrote the foreword to our book.
I
We were
saw that.
very,
Yeah,
very grateful for that. And he had us on
yeah,
his podcast. So a lot of kudos to him and the work his team has been doing.
yeah. So it's the field to be in, let's say, at the moment when it comes to discussion on leadership topics, and rightfully so, I would have to say. I mean, there's a discipline for sure that, and I'm not from the military, so I'm not speaking
Hmm.
firsthand, but I can see that there's a discipline that comes out of military that is very applicable in leadership, and
Hmm.
not only leadership, but as a leader yourself, right? As an individual, the way you conduct yourself, the way you hold yourself with integrity, and all the other attributes that go with that, and that's largely where your book is based around, right? It's around those attributes, and it's around looking at people.
It is. And so, Mike and I, and to your first point about there's some stories.
Yes.
And for those who haven't read it, some of those are stories of failure. And one of the things that Mike and I tried to put forward in the book, because you read so many books where people are like, this is how you do it, this is what you should do.
Yeah.
And while Mike and I wanted that to be a part, what we wanted to impart to the readers was these are the scars, mistakes, failures that we had to learn from that launched us into really, really great practices. We haven't perfected everything, but we absolutely know that along the course of the way, we have a lot to pass on and create a legacy of leadership with those people that are hiring managers and decision makers when it comes to talent. We were both we call it the world's greatest leadership incubator, the military service, because you're just forced at a very, very young age to take an awful lot of responsibility. And so we were really, really grateful for that. Two more quick points, and that is, the United States Army arguably has produced more leaders than anybody else. And so there's a lot of great material that applies across the board because leadership is leadership. Your environment's simply different. But the reason that we chose special operations, well, number one, to your point, it's in vogue. It catches people's attention. But we were really adamant about making the point that despite what you see in Hollywood and the movies about special operations, I can take anybody off the street and give them drone support, air support. I can give them the most modern day weapons, night vision goggles, signals, and imagery intelligence. I can give them all of that. And it doesn't make them special operations. What makes special operations special is the people, and from there, digging into the attributes that all of those special operations forces look for. So when we combine that with the best practices of what great companies were doing, be that Netflix or HP or Google or any number of companies that we cited, we were trying to, you could easily boil the ocean on this topic, and we were trying not to do that, which is exceptionally hard. But boil it down to say, when you get talent right, this is what it looks like in the business world and the military world, and they're not dissimilar. So it was a lot of books on hiring. There's a lot of books on special operations, and we were really hoping that we honored both sides of the equation. Where people would say, "Hey, these were two good things to pair," and we learned a lot.
Well, for me, there were so many great takeaways. Unfortunately, we're not going to get through them all, of course, but I will touch on a couple that I hope are of interest. But I think, in particular, if we talk who this book would be extremely valuable for, this is just my own perspective, business leaders and HR leaders, definitely. Talents from a different angle, but talents also. And I think, if you're looking for a good read during the holidays, this would be a good choice. And there's a topic in there that we spoke about when we first caught up, which is about the importance of knowing yourself and know thyself. I wonder if you could sort of share a little bit more on that, please.
So there's a bunch of parts that go into that. But in modern hiring and even promotion selection, Mike and I like to say that the default position of hiring managers, leaders, and talent acquisition is lazy. Now, we don't mean that as an insult. We mean it as they're looking for the easiest path forward. And so when when you're selecting talent for promotion or to bring into your firm,
Yep.
you're thinking the best way to do that is to simply, hey, create this laundry list of things that we need as far as skills and competencies. And do we like the person? So it's likability and this set of objective requirements. And the know yourself part is a couple points. Number one, do you know the DNA of your company and what makes it successful? We're all different from a startup to a large enterprise. There are different skills, competencies, and attributes that make you thrive and successful in different organizations.
Mm.
Do you know your company? Number two, do you really know your team? If you're filling an empty position, do you understand? Well, let me put it a different way. Let's say you have a manager for some R&D project. There's a list of technical requirements. Great. But if they have all of those things, the team dynamic and knowing yourself, knowing your team, knowing what will succeed, thrive, and collaborate, essentially creating a success profile for the human being that's going to be in that role is so important before you go to market. Otherwise, you're just hiring. If you don't know the human dynamic, why interview? Just take the resume and say, this looks like the best one. We'll hire them. So it is about knowing yourself, knowing your company, knowing your brand, your service, your clients, but understanding the DNA that allows somebody to operate successfully in that environment and then deliver exceptional service, be it your product, your service, or whatever it is you're presenting and earning revenue on.
Okay, excellent. And I guess a lead off of that is something you mentioned multiple times in the book, and that's hire for character, train for skills.
Yeah.
I found that it resonated very loudly with me, but I found it quite an interesting approach, but very valid in what you describe in the book.
So, and two things. Number one, that's how all of the U.S. special operations and some of our allied special operations work. There's two examples. I'm going to break them into two parts. Number one is, let's take the Navy SEALs. They have recruiters that are out there, being a great example for Navy recruiting. But if you go into a high school or a college and you say, how many people know how to jump out of a plane at high altitude on oxygen, navigate their parachute into a target called, hey-ho, high altitude, high opening, and navigate? Or how many people know how to hit a target with a high caliber weapon at 800 yards accurately? Nobody's going to raise their hands. Those skills don't exist. So by default, special operations has to hire on character first and foremost. So that's part one. Part two is the two quotes that we really pulled out in the book was, the founder of Porsche is the one who said, hire for character, train for skill. And we all know how that car company's turned out. And I happen to own one, thankfully. Now that my kids are off the payroll, let me put that plug in there. I can do that. I was a regular SUV guy until they get off the payroll. But then there was, and to a certain degree, we have to admit that this book is a little bit US centric. But we believe the principles apply globally, and I've hired globally. And there was this great airline that tried to break into the market years ago called Southwest Airlines. And the CEO was Herb Kelleher. And he said, we hire great attitudes. We can teach everything else, but we can't teach you to have a great attitude. We can't teach you to have a great approach to life. And if you've got that, we can do everything else. Now, our caveat to that is you're not hiring a recent MBA grad from an Ivy League school to be the CEO of your company. There are skills, there are competencies and experiences you need. But those experiences tell you where you've been. Character and attitude tell you where you're going.
Right. And you list 9 talent attributes.
We do.
That support that. I'm not going to ask you to go through all of them, but so you can breathe again. But my point in raising it is that for sure, as we look at our listener base, which is executive talents, it's important for the talents to realize that various attributes are important. and you
Yes.
need to be able to demonstrate a range of those attributes depending on the role that you're looking to fill. And I guess that all sort of falls into the topic around the hiring process and the interviewing process and how you go about that. So is there any sort of secrets when we start to look at interview strategies from a talent point of view now, George? So if you're a talent and you're looking for your next big career move, what are some of the core attributes that you should be sort of holding yourself to?
Well, if I may, I'll answer both sides. The
Yeah,
9 attributes is we believe that these were we boiled it down from probably 20 down to 9.
right.
And when we talked about earlier, know yourself, we think that those are a great guide for executives to say, of these 9, maybe these 3 or 4 are exactly what we need the most of in a candidate to be successful in this role.
Right.
Curiosity was one of those that's an admirable trait. But if you're hiring a chief revenue officer or a head of sales, curiosity is not going to be amongst the list, but resiliency may be the thing that you absolutely, their resiliency, their drive, their effective intelligence.
Yes.
And so you need to know which of the 9 that you're looking for success in this role, this environment, and that will lead the team. Because I'll come back to this point. I could go down a really bad rabbit hole, but executive referrals are the most insidious. They're the worst hires. And executives won't tell you that, but given I've hired over 2,500, I will tell you, oh yeah, I know Joe or Sally or whomever over at this company, and they were awesome, so they're going to come right in here and do it. Those attributes are important in your environment.
Yes.
Just because somebody was successful in a different environment, you have to know yourself. Now, on the candidate side, you have to look at those things, and know yourself applies to candidates. When I do career coaching, most people learn to answer the basic questions, and they can talk about their accomplishments and what's on their resume. Now, I'm going to do a podcast on the Talent War podcast and teaching people how to interview without looking at a resume. And it throws the executives off that I interview because I want to know the DNA. So most leaders that have moved up the ladder, the toughest question for them to ask, for them to answer when I ask, is tell me about your leadership style. Because they've never gone down those attributes. They've never gone down those subjective assets that they have as a leader that enabled them to be successful in the multiple environments. So if you're a candidate, you need to know what you're highlighting to that company for that role. Is it your effective intelligence? Meaning it doesn't matter what you throw at me. If there's never been a solution, I will find a solution. Effective intelligence. It might be team ability, that I have the ability to work in the most diverse groups and operate with the principle best idea wins. So what are those attributes as a candidate that I need to bring forward that demonstrate for this environment, for this role, will make me thrive and succeed?
I think that's a key message just there, right? Is so many people just look at the role and they turn up and they don't make that association.
They don't, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but
no, please.
It's interesting with executives, and when I'm coaching them, and I've coached several to do career transitions, they're asked about their history, but they're not asked about what makes them tick. So they've never had to articulate it, which is an entirely separate skill. And so first you have to think about it and know yourself. Executives, the longer they're in the corporate world, the more that their success or the way they do things becomes muscle memory. Meaning they adapt to the environment, they execute according to what they've used in the past, but they've never been asked to articulate it. And so when you hear a candidate say, this is how, these are the things within me that enabled me to achieve the success, as an employer, you're able to gauge more quickly, yeah, I can see that person fitting in here and doing really well, or oh my God, this person's going to be a disaster because they're very, directive in nature. They're
Right.
dictatorial. They're not collaborative. You can hear when somebody discusses their attributes much more clearly do they fit. And the best part of it is you're out of the likability factor, which is where most executives hire. Hey, I like this person. I like their resume. I think they'll do good here. It's like, okay, we know how that usually works out.
You have a very nice methodology that you stepped me through when we first spoke
Oh, yeah.
around this whole construct. I won't ask you to do it now, but it just demonstrates the degree of, I would say, complacency that we evolve through as executives. Just as you said, we develop this muscle memory or unconscious habits, if you like, about what's happened in the past, will continue to do in the future. And it's not really the right predictor. That's for sure. Yeah.
It is. And when I ask executives, like we went through that drill, what it tells me, among multiple things that it tells me, is how self-aware is this executive or executive candidate, and how committed are they to self-improvement. It also gives me authenticity and integrity. It's pretty easy after my number of repetitions when I can, if somebody tries to blow through that test, I know in like 5 seconds in. But it's really interesting because you learn the DNA. And I will say something that's a little different that executives may not like. If you're honest and authentic and you know yourself and you put forward those attributes in an interview and you're still not selected, you should be considering that a very good thing.
Yes.
Because there are great candidates and there are great roles. That doesn't mean they go together. You want great on both sides, but right candidate, right role. And so finding their DNA, what makes them successful, if you know what's successful in the role, you make much better matches and have a much, much higher success factor of them driving great results for your company and taking great care of your wonderful team.
It also highlights an area, George, that I think our corporate world is underperforming in, and that is, as leaders, our education in interviewing professionally, and rather than just following, a model like a star model or something, actually being able to conduct an interview in the right way and have the right preparation in place. I think we're very underdone in that regard.
Yeah, we are. And so when we talked about the book, we talked about the know yourself and we talk about the attributes. Special operations and great organizations, what they have in common for talent is they have a defined process that helps you reveal it to the best ability you can. Are there going to be people that skate through an interview because they're great interviewers? Yeah, there are. And we've seen it lots of times. My hit ratio, because, you do number of repetitions, you get better and better and better. But I will have one slip by me. It's rare, but it happens. But you have to have a process that reveals those attributes in some form or fashion. And I'll give you one of the attributes that nobody asks about in an interview, which is integrity. It's like that's one of the attributes, but people take it for granted amongst executives. But what gets companies in trouble more often than not is a breach of integrity. And we don't screen for it. Why? If it's important to you, why are you assuming that as fact? So you have to have a process that reveals it. You have to have a process that throws some challenges or a mountain in there, something that creates stress, or something that creates them to think and talk about themselves in a way that's a little bit of a departure from the resume. And then you start to see a more holistic version of the person.
And that, for me, is probably where it becomes challenging for the typical leader, is they don't know which questions are going to extract that line of information, rather than just the rhetoric, that you could read from the resume. So if we were in an interview and you asked me about integrity, sure, George, I'm the most integral person you'll ever meet, and
Yeah.
yeah. But if you ask me the right question, then that transpires into an entirely different response, right?
Exactly. And that's where people have to think about their hiring process ahead of the need. And so, and I've used that in my speeches, and I've said, actually had a CEO, and he says, well, how the heck do you ask about integrity? And I said, okay, first of all, I want you to think of a position where you weren't the CEO, where you were below the C-suite. Walk me through your thought process and the situation where you had to deliver bad results or bad news, even when you knew the consequences to your career would be negative or there would be ramifications to your team that were negative. How did you handle that? And it forces them to go back to a time where they were in that pressure situation, and it really draws out how they think. And it's just as simple as changing a question. Instead of, do you have something? Tell me about the time you exercised that particular trait.
Yeah, very important. I mean, we could spend another whole session talking about interviewing and
Yeah.
what we do or don't do. I'm conscious of the time, so I'll ask you for some final takeaways in a moment. But there's one topic I really wanted to touch on and get your insights
Yeah.
on before we wrap up. And in the book, you talk about a winning formula, and the formula is talent plus leadership equals victory.
Yep.
And I feel myself that's such a powerful equation. But I wonder if you could just expand on that a little bit more, please.
Yeah, a couple things. And so it really started with when we were writing this book, and then you get to the end of the book and you're like, okay, how do we button this up? How do we kind of bring it all together? And Mike and I took a different route, which was chapter 10, I believe it is you can't hire or fire your way to success. You must lead.
Mm-hmm.
And if you couple that thought with the very common fact that most people don't leave bad companies, they leave bad managers and bad bosses.
Yeah.
It means if you've done all of these things to get great talent in the door, you still have to lead, mentor, coach, and train, because A players and A talent absolutely want to work with A players. They want to grow, they want to improve their skills, and they want to move up the ladder. So you have to have leadership. And then the last thing I would say, it's a refrain that we kind of pound the desk on. I appreciate that there are a lot of people out there that leave their mark on the world with a particular product, who have the founders of Google, the founders of Facebook, just for the big names.
Yep.
But there are all kinds of other dynamic products. But really, the only thing you can leave when you step out of the corporate world or move to another firm is a legacy of leadership, creating junior empowered leaders below you that will take care of the next generation of leaders. So if you have great talent and you have great leadership that's dedicated to creating a legacy of leadership, your company is going to be flexible, responsive, and be able to cover whatever comes at them economically, environmentally, or otherwise. And you need those two things. You do that, more often than not, you're going to win in your space.
Yeah. In the book, you tell the story about Mike, how he was number one in everything he did, and yet in his first, I don't know if it was first role as leader, but he failed, and then it ended up being as a result of the leadership that was missing above him, and it took a shift to be working under Jocko, I think it was, for his ability to then start to really shine. So his talent to be able to come through in the way that it could.
It's a great example of when you have poor leadership and that pall is cast over all of your junior leaders. They say optimism is infectious. A good attitude is infectious. Good leadership is infectious, and good leadership allows great traits to come out. But the reverse is always true. When you have bad leaders, if you have upcoming talented leaders, talented individual contributors, if you're you're putting a blanket over that lamp, they've got to get out from under that blanket. They'll leave a company. Like in Mike's case, he went from one team to another. And once he got to the other team, And by the way, when he got to the other team, it was actually Jocko that pulled him into a shed and said, "You're not bringing any of that toxicity over here. It's a clean slate. I'm going to judge you by your performance, and you're going to go as far as your performance takes you."
Right.
And Mike's career takes off. And I've had the same thing in multiple occasions where I knew I could do a great job and I did the best within the environment. But I had leaders that were absolutely like, no matter what I did, it's stay in the corner, stay in your place. I'm going to take credit and I'm going to keep you here.
Right.
And I'm not going to promote you. I'm not going to, I may incentivize you, but I'm incentivizing so you stay to make me look good. You do those things, you're, as we said also in the book, talent has choices and they'll make those choices. And they usually, for bad leadership, are not going to be good ones if you're a bad leader.
Yeah. It's such a powerful book, I have to say. Couple more questions before we wrap up.
Hey, fire away.
Anything that you're currently working on that you would like to announce or share, or I don't know if you can announce some of the things, but
well, we are, well, number one, I'm starting up a new practice. I'm, a partner emeritus at Talent War Group. They have a great cadre of leaders that are doing a lot more leadership development, and my push is towards executive search. So I'm standing up a practice in Austin for this amazing firm called Randle Partners. Name spelled differently, just coincidence. I kind of took it as a sign of fate. But also my co-author and I, and then two others we've got most of a second book done in us. And it is the best way to describe it, because we haven't come up with a title, which believe me, is like outside of doing an audiobook is the hardest thing to do, is figure out our title. But it's the intersection of leadership and culture, because most people are talking about those topics as if they are separate. And leadership behaviors define culture. And so now we're digging into the leadership side, how you can create the cultures you need to succeed and thrive, but it begins with your leadership abilities and competencies and attributes. So we're having that book done. When we're going to release it, we technically, if we pushed it, we could release it by Christmas, but our problem is in the United States, we have these political elections, and they suck all the air out of the social media and everything. And so there's a certain amount of timing to hold off, but we think this leadership and culture book will be a great companion to the book that we've done before.
Wow, I look forward to reading. So I'll keep a vigilant watch on your sites.
I will send you a copy as soon as we get it done, and you can take a good look at it.
Thank you for taking up the hint.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you very much. So on that note, George, anywhere that the audience can find you, where would you like them to check out some of the things you're doing?
So wherever podcasts are, you can pick up the Talent War podcast. You can find the Talent War Group at talentwargroup.com. You can find me at George at Talent War Group, or you find me George at RandlePartnersLLC.com. Find me on LinkedIn is probably the best way. But if you want to get a good insight, then I would tell you, pretty much wherever books are sold on Amazon, is pick up a copy of the Talent War, because it's just one of those things where you're going to see a lot of mistakes over the course of our career, but the things that we did that were right, that you can simply plagiarize till the end of time and really make a difference on the leadership and the talent and the culture of your company. So the Talent War has special operations, great organizations win on talent. Amazon's probably the best place to tell you to go to find it.
Yep, and it's available audio as well as hard copy, right?
Yes, that was the most brutal thing that Mike and I have ever done. We got done with the audiobook. We each slept 15 hours after we got it done. Physical specimens, whatever. Standing up there, speaking into a mic, chest out, diaphragm tight. It was like, I have a whole new respect for singers and public speakers. It was like, I got to the end of that, I was dead. But we did the audiobook ourselves because we wanted the emphasis and the voice to really be ours, because it was, really our ideas. And we wanted people to kind of hear from the horse's mouth, as they say.
Yeah. I found it came across very well, and Jocko at the beginning, of course, is a very notable voice. So sort of set the scene for both of you, and yeah, it was very good. It was very good. Any final takeaways before we close up?
Two things that I would leave a lot of the executives with. Well, three quick things. One of the things that we pointed out, your company is going to go wrong, especially in this environment with diversity, equity, inclusion, the political social media blurring. Your HR leader has to be a strategic leader, without doubt. As Tracy Keogh said, HR isn't at the table, HR is the table. And that's the way it should be. And you should compensate them like you would any other C-suite person. The other thing is, talent is the only competitive advantage you can hope to achieve and maintain. And if you focus on your talent and become a talent magnet, so many of your challenges and problems will go away for you.
Great. George Randle, it's been an honor and a great conversation. Really enjoyed it. Thank you very much, and look forward to keeping in contact and connecting in the future when that next book is launched.
It sounds great, Wayne. An honor, my privilege to be on, and thank you so much for inviting me.
I look forward to keeping in touch. All right. Thank you.